Namaskar and welcome to StudyIQ. I am your friend Rahul Saig. The agenda for today's discussion is quite clear from the image, is it not? Our discussion is about Israel-Palestine. We all know that there is conflict going on between Israel and Hamas in Gaza City. On October 7, 2023, Hamas carried out a terror attack in Israel, taking many hostages. After that, Israel retaliated and the war is going on. It's been more than a month. The conflict continues. Hostilities rise and the death toll is ever rising. Amidst all this chaos, in today's video lecture, we are raising a question. Is Israel breaking the laws of war in Gaza? That is going to be the agenda for today's discussion. But before I begin, you will have a question in your mind. So why not ask the question other way around? Is Hamas breaking the laws of war in Gaza? Of course, Hamas is breaking. Hamas is a non-state actor. It is a terror group. So it does not follow the rules of war. But Israel is a state party. It is bound by international agreements, international conventions. That's why we are raising the question. In fact, the more important part for us to understand from exam point of view is the international humanitarian law. Under that, we are going to specifically focus on Doctrine of Proportionality, which is right now in news considering the attacks on hospitals and attacks on other buildings in Gaza City. A question can be asked to you in the mains. What do you understand by international humanitarian law? Who implements it, etc.? To answer such queries, you will get very good fodder or content in this video lecture. To get to know that, be with me till the very end. All right, let's begin. But before that, to all the UPSC civil services aspirants, I hope your Diwali was safe, sound, you enjoyed a lot. But remember that Diwali still continues for StudyIQ discounts. Till 16th November, the prices have been slashed. If you use the code Rahul Live, you will get the biggest discount on the P2I program, Prelims to Interview program. It is available in 3 formats: English, Hindi, and in a bilingual format. The English batch is starting from 17th November. Enroll now. I'll see you in the class. This is the most comprehensive program where we will be with you for prelims, for mains, for interview, for all the stages. All right, do it soon. Right, let's begin our discussion. As I told you, our discussion is about Israel-Palestine issue, and you do know that from October 7, there is a conflict going on between the two parties. Israel and Hamas fighting. It has now heated up in the Gaza city. There have been attacks, counter-attacks. There have been claims, counter-claims. Right, a missile which fell on hospital a few days back. We spoke about the issue of disinformation or information as a tool in the war. That when the missile it fell on hospital, Gaza claimed that Israel fired it. Israel said it was the Hamas's missile which fell on the hospital. Now, amidst all this chaos, as I told you, our discussion is to understand the rules of war. Now, there's a great idiom or great saying that all is fair in love and war. We are not going to discuss about love, but I would say all is not fair in love also. But for war, I can tell you that all is not fair in war. The statement is by Sun Tzu, the Chinese philosopher. All is fair in love and war. Are there any rules and regulations? Yes, there are. You need to understand all is not fair in war, because if you are in the international arena, you need to follow the global rules and regulations. And there are certain rules of war which have already been made, because we have gone through 2 devastating and catastrophic world wars, World War I and World War II. So after the Second World War, the international community came together. The United Nations was there. Red Cross Society, which is already there since 1880s itself, they all came together to bring the Geneva Conventions. Geneva Conventions were brought in 1949. These conventions, along with the additional protocols, there are 3 additional protocols. These are called IHL, the International Humanitarian Law. So there are 4 conventions. 4 conventions were finalized in 1949 itself. The first convention is the Geneva Convention to protect wounded and sick soldiers on land during the war. Now, this applies to both the parties, right? This applies to state parties. Whenever there's a conflict going on between 2 countries, the soldiers who are sick, the soldiers who are wounded, they have to be protected. They have to be given medical treatment. Transports have to be done. And those who are under the aegis of Red Cross. Now, you do understand Red Cross symbol. It goes through a plus symbol, a red plus symbol, something like this. There is also a red crescent, a half moon. And since 2005, there is also a red emblem, which is a diamond-shaped emblem. These represent the Red Cross. And under their aegis, whoever is being treated, they have to be protected. The second convention, it protects wounded, sick, or shipwrecked military personnel at sea during the war. Now, this is for a naval war. All right, I would say this does not apply technically right now in the Israel-Hamas conflict to a large extent, because the conflict is going on the land. The third convention, it applies to the prisoners of war. Now, whenever two state parties are in conflict, now you do understand that whenever there's a conflict going on, you will catch hold of the prisoners from one side, POW, prisoners of war. The convention states that as soon as the hostilities have ended, the prisoners of war must be released and repatriated. That is the third convention. And then there is a fourth convention which affords protection to civilians, now including people in the occupied territory. Whoever is occupied, there also you have to protect the civilians. Now, this convention applies largely right now in the ongoing conflict. Apart from these four conventions, there are three additional protocols which have been finalized. And out of that, one protocol is very, very important in the current conflict, because the current conflict, I wouldn't say it's a conflict between two state parties. It's a conflict between one state party and a terror group, non-state actor, Hamas. All right. So, if you look at these protocols, there were two additional protocols. First protocol, protocol 1, was to strengthen the protection to victims of international armed conflict, and also to non-international armed conflict. And this non-international armed conflict, it also includes wars of national liberation or any other non-international armed conflict. So these protocols are very much relevant right now in the ongoing Gaza conflict. Apart from that, the third protocol, it came in the 21st century in 2005. It basically added a red crystal emblem. As I told you, the Red Cross, it is signified by a plus symbol, by a red crescent, a red moon like this, and then there is a red crystal. Now, all three, they signify the Red Cross Society, the International Red Cross Society. Now, sir, now I have understood the international humanitarian law. But why are we discussing this currently? Because probably these rules are being broken. As I told you, you cannot expect Hamas to follow these rules, right? But Israel being a state party, they must follow these rules. They are a part and parcel of the international global order. Now, question comes up. So why you are raising it right now? Because we have to ask a question. Sir, can civilian structures, whenever there is a conflict going on, can they be attacked? Can a state party attack a civilian structure? Now, what is a civilian structure? It means it can be a school, it can be a housing complex, it can be a hospital. Can these be attacked? According to Geneva Convention, according to international humanitarian law, no, they cannot be attacked. Now, question comes up. Sir, what if somebody attacks? It might amount to a war crime. Why they are not attacked? Because it is assumed that schools, hospitals, housing complexes, they are not part of military action, right? They are not part of a command center, or say they do not hold any military munitions, they do not have any arms and ammunition. They are simple civilians. That's why they should not be attacked. However, in the conventions itself, in the conventions and the protocol, there is a caveat. Now, what is this caveat? Is if civilian structures are being used for military objectives, now in such a scenario, you can attack a civilian structure. Now, under this itself, probably you can say Israel is attacking the civilian structures in Gaza. Now, question comes up. Sir, what is this caveat? The caveat is doctrine of proportionality. There might be a standalone question. What do you understand by doctrine of proportionality connected to the international humanitarian law? It's quite simple. As I told you, directly you cannot attack civilian structures. But if these civilian structures are being used for military actions by the other party, then you must follow the doctrine of proportionality in attacking the civilian structures. It stipulates that parties who are in conflict, they must ensure that whatever power you're using, whatever ammunitions you're using for your military advantage, you must anticipate the damage out of it. That means what will be the collateral damage to the civilians that must be assessed before carrying out attacks. That means you cannot attack indiscriminately. You cannot use disproportionate power. Meaning, say for instance, one can say that you can use a guided missile or a pinpointed attack or a drone attack on that civilian structure which you think or you have intelligence that it is being used for the military purpose by the other parties. That is just an example that I'm quoting. All right. So disproportionate power should not be used. That means even if I know that okay, this complex or this particular hospital, say for that matter, it is being used by the other party as a command center. Now, once you know that you're going to attack it, if there are civilians there, there must be a due warning, and the attack should be pinpointed. Ensure that whatever military advantage you're gaining, it is because of that the civilians' lives must not be lost. Collateral damage should not be very huge. That is the meaning of doctrine of proportionality. Now, under that, before attacking, assessment has to be made what harm would be there on the civilians. And if you violate these clauses, what does it amount to? It basically amounts to war crimes. Now, question comes up, sir, okay, I understood what you told about international humanitarian law. I also understood doctrine of proportionality. It is mostly based on common sense. Now, question comes up, what if I violate it? Or are there any other rules? What if I violate it? If you violate it, you would be answerable at the international arena, right? Apart from this doctrine of proportionality, we also have certain other rules and regulations. Rule like prohibition of indiscriminate attack, of course. There is also obligation to give warning in advance if you're attacking civilian structures. Obligation to give access to humanitarian aid in the conflict zone. And there is also a rule of no hostage taking. Now, that's why I told you, if you ask a question, sir, why you are not raising a query that is Hamas breaking the rules of war? Of course it is breaking. As I told you, it's a terror group. It does not follow these things. They first took the hostages. So hostage taking is a no-no completely in Geneva Conventions. That's a war crime. In fact, it is also defined as a war crime under the Rome Statute of the ICC, not the International Cricket Council, but International Criminal Court. All right. So that's a war crime. Apart from that, international state parties, they are also governed by other humanitarian or human rights treaties like the International Covenant on the Civil and Political Rights, Convention against Torture, Conventions against other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. So a state is bound by all these things. That means it is bound by the doctrine of proportionality. It is bound by these things. Now the question is, sir, what if they violate? It can become a war crime. There can be action through collective security, or there can be action from United Nations. Now, please remember, the international humanitarian law, whichever I defined right now, Geneva Conventions and 3 additional protocols, they never question why you're going to war. They do not question why you're going to war. Please remember, that question must be raised through the United Nations Charter itself, that is through UN. Now, that is why we speak about United Nations in a rather condescending tone. Many experts do highlight that United Nations has been really dysfunctional in ending these hostilities. Now, add to this, there is a complex problem. Now, you think that, sir, these international humanitarian laws, they are more like moral principles. They look like there is no sanction or no authority which is going to implement it, because UN itself has been, or UN's track record, I wouldn't say has been really great. Why? Because the doctrine of proportionality, or be it the international humanitarian law, it is really complex and tricky to implement. Why? Because attribution, gathering the evidences, and bringing all the charges, etc., it would be very, very tough. Why? Certain actors, they might not accept, or parties, they might not be willing to adhere to them. Say, for example, Israel. Now, Israel is not a party itself to the International Criminal Court, ICC. It does not follow the Rome Statute, but they are a part and parcel of the Geneva Conventions. In fact, 194 countries have signed it. Many have not ratified it, but nonetheless, it is quite active. So this is a real problem. One, international community or international institutions have rather failed to bring an end to these hostilities and hold people accountable. Let me just give you some examples. Let's first wait and watch when this Israel-Hamas conflict will end. But let me give you some examples from before. Nothing has happened, right? For example, Syria. In Aleppo, there was an attack from the government forces itself, government forces and its allies, the Russians. In 2016 itself, apparently they used chemical weapons. They fired indiscriminately on hospitals, on civilian structures in Aleppo to gain control there. It was heavily criticized, but no action, or I would say no punishment for that matter. I can give example of South Sudan in 2016 in the Juba city. In fact, in Juba attacks in 2016, if I'm not wrong, it was I think July 2016, right? In July 2016, there were heinous attacks which targeted civilians, which even targeted the humanitarian personnel, humanitarian organization, the NGO personnel also, right? Apart from that, Russia, Ukraine, since 2014 itself, I can give example of 2014. In 2014, a Malaysian airline was fired upon, and nobody took the responsibility. Nobody took the responsibility. Now you see here what's happening. Conflict is going on between Russia and Ukraine. A Malaysian airlines was going, and it was attacked. It was under attack, and 298 people on board, they lost their lives. No question, no accountability. All right, and that's why it becomes really complex. Now you do understand. So the question that you raised, it is rather redundant, right now. But let's try to understand: is Israel following the international humanitarian law? I would say to a large extent, no. Why? Because Israel itself has suggested that they are using unguided bomb rates. Now, these unguided bombs, they're actually called as dumb bombs, right? There is a term called as dumb bomb. Now, dumb bomb means a bomb which is not guided. You simply fire it. It's not a pinpointed bomb or a pinpointed attack. So, using these dumb bombs or unguided bombs, you do not know where it is falling. There can be collateral damage for sure. Apart from that, there was a lot of hue and cry about attacks on hospitals, and recently the Israelis have also highlighted that they have intelligence that hospitals have been made command centers of Hamas. Hospitals are being used. Tunnels have been built under the hospital Al Shifa, which is right now the ground of conflict in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Currently, US has also said that according to their intelligence report, Hamas is using Al Shifa hospital as a command center. You can see here US intelligence. It says Hamas has used Al Shifa to hold the hostages, and right now release of hostages is something for which Israel is fighting. Israel is saying that we will go for an all-out victory, and very recently they have said that we are going to enter the hospital in the Gaza city. In the last 24 hours, there have been a lot of developments. The war is now going on in the hospital itself, or I would say hospital is now the center of that conflict itself. Hamas has already criticized the United States of America for this intelligence report, and they have also highlighted that the number of lives lost in this conflict from the Gaza side is more than 14,000. Again, the numbers are disputed from either side, or Hamas says higher number, Israel says not this much number. US has also suggested that in the previous hospital attack, there were hardly 100 to 150 deaths. So the war of information, disinformation is going on. But the ultimate conclusion out of this discussion is nobody is following the international humanitarian law. And that is currently in shambles. There is a question, or there is a question on the future of these international humanitarian laws itself, because if parties violate these laws with impunity, then the future looks very, very bleak, isn't it? Let's wait and watch what exactly happens or what unfolds in this conflict. We'll be keeping an eye on that. But I hope in this discussion you have understood what is the meaning of international humanitarian law, what are Geneva Conventions, the 3 additional protocols, what is Doctrine of Proportionality. All right, with that note, let me end my discussion. Thank you for watching this video. Jai Hind.